You know, people have always said that you're entitled to your own opinions, but you aren't entitled to your own facts. And it sounds self evident in case closing, like there wouldn't be wiggle room around it. And conceptually, there isn't, but it assumes more of the facts in question than we can guarantee as consumers of media and politics. How do you know what you're talking about is even a fact? How do you know it hasn't been falsified or contorted in a way to be deliberately misleading? You can't even really look up facts anymore when it comes to important issues, because maybe you'll see something called a fact, but then it's like, well, who runs the website it's printed on, or who reported it, or who studied it and discovered it in the first place, and what were their motivations, and what are the motivations behind all these people and organizations that have gotten their mitts on this fact and bounced it around between themselves, deciding how best to use it. It's to the point where even supposedly common knowledge almost appears impossible to verify. You can post a study that supports your point of view, and someone will be like, that study's bullshit, here's one that found the opposite results, and you're at a permanent impasse with no safe method of resolution. It's enough to make someone just want to disconnect altogether and become completely distrusting of knowledge in general, but you can't do that, because then you'll never learn anything new for the rest of your life. So what it really means, if you want to stay connected, is that it's just more work for you in the research department. You have to look for things that are cited multiple times across political lines, and it's annoying, but necessary. Or you can just craft completely uninformed perspectives with nothing but your inner logic to guide you, which is something I used to do exclusively, and still like to sometimes, because you can be much more creative and persuasive when you're not constrained by boring-ass reality. A good example of a purely logic-based argument, minus any real-world application or nuance, is saying something like, without guns, there wouldn't be any shootings. Now, that is an undeniably factual statement. It is true beyond a shadow of a doubt that if there were 0 guns in the world, there would be no shootings. Gun-related, anyway. There'd still be plenty of shootings on movie sets and basketball courts, but let's pretend we don't have any linguistic problems with the statement. And before you tell me that's a bad joke, know that I only made it so I wouldn't see it show up 6 times in the comments section, alright? It's true there would be no shootings. It's also true beyond a shadow of a doubt that if there were no animals, there would be no animal abuse. So, clearly the solution to people mistreating their pets is to just get rid of pets altogether. It's sound logic. Sounds like something a computer would come up with. If you ask a supercomputer how to avoid losing a game of chess, that supercomputer might tell you to incinerate the chessboard and throw the pieces in a wood chipper, and you would not be able to say that it's wrong. But are you actually going to enact that as your solution, or are you going to look for an answer that more closely adheres to the rules of society and life as we know it? Because consistently incinerating chessboards is a great way to get nobody to ever play chess with you again, and that's an easily foreseeable consequence that the solution completely ignores because it doesn't have to take that into account. All it was shooting for was a logically sound answer, but logically sound answers are not good enough. And what happens when they have unintended consequences that could create an even worse problem than the one you solved? Shit's never simple. I'm not claiming to have a solution to shootings myself, since I'm trying not to run around as half-cocked as I used to. Progressives liked episode 77, when I first talked about guns and shootings, and I said guns are the problem, and rednecks don't care about dying children as much as they like knocking tin cans off fence posts and all that bullshit. Apparently, some well-known left-wing activist actually posted that video on her Tumblr at the time. It resonated with angry people because I was pretending to be angry when I was reading it out. Like, that's actually straight-up performative outrage. If you ever doubted that shit exists, let me stand as the proof. I got into that script and legitimately faked all my exasperation because I wanted the jokes to play a certain way, and I thought they would have more impact if I sounded like I cared. Sorry if that breaks anyone's illusions about me, but I feel like any illusions to be had about that particular episode were probably broken by the next 100 or so episodes. I only cared about shootings insofar as they were ruining my TV experience, either by making some shows delay segments out of respect, or some comedy shows just addressing that shit right on the air and being hella depressing for no reason. But I'm hardly in the minority. Even people who still claim to care about shootings oftentimes only care about one type of shooting, and that's the kind where a white man between the ages of 45 and 65 yells Trump 2020 before lighting up a Whole Foods. I'll grant you that the non-political school shootings also turn your stomach, and mine too, but it'll be a cold day in hell before I see anyone who frequently pushes for gun control shed any new tears over people in the rough parts of Chicago getting holes put through them multiple times a day, every day. You just accept that. We all just accept that. I'm not any better than you in that respect, but whereas my words have a consistent quality to them, yours are very much malleable to fit the situation. Honestly, if you want to try to confiscate guns, I could say go for it, but only on the condition that you have to start with the inner cities, and then we'll see how long it takes you to give up, assuming there are any of you left. I meant to write about something completely different this episode, so I guess we'll just go there now. Gender dysphoria. The last time I did an episode about this subject, I asked any trans viewers of mine, which there's some, if instead of being trans, they'd rather have just been born as the sex they preferred, and everyone who commented said yes. And why the hell wouldn't they? Transgenderism is not a wanted mode of being, by their own admission. It's a predicament. Nobody wants to be trans. They want to be what they feel like they are, fully and completely, without a shred of their biological self remaining. Unfortunately, that's currently impossible, since gender reassignment surgery is hardly the modern medicinal miracle it's cracked up to be, with many trans people who undergo the surgery wanting to undo it. We've all seen what Caitlyn Jenner looks like. She's not the ideal woman for anybody. But I'll pose a different question to my trans viewers now, and please comment your answer after the video. But if there was a cure for gender dysphoria, would you take it? Let's say you're a dude who wants to be a woman, which is the way more common version of that, which is interesting, and I wonder why. But regardless, would you take medicine that cured you of those thoughts and reinstated your identity as a biological man, or if you're the opposite, as a biological woman? I don't want to assume your answer. I assumed the last one because that was much more obvious of a question. Who the hell wouldn't want to be purely the sex they've spent most of their life trying to be? But maybe this one is trickier because we're talking about erasing a feeling you might have had for quite a long time. But you also know that if you're transgender, something is wrong. Like, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. To be transgender is to be the result of something going wrong, whether you think it's your brain chemistry or body makeup. Brain seems much more likely to me based on the fact that if it were your body that was the issue, a lot more things would have to be going wrong in exactly the same way to create that opposing symmetry. It's really a question of probability at that point. What's more likely to be wrong? Your DNA, testosterone, estrogen levels, genitalia, XY chromosomes, sex-specific organs like the uterus, and all the other countless biological particularities that only apply to one gender or the other? Is it more likely that all of that is wrong at the same time in the same way, or just one small part of your brain got its wires crossed? When I think of it that way, I find it almost impossible to lean in the direction of the body you were born in being the issue. I straight up can't justify that with anything, and the people who are dead set on justifying it have found that they can't do so either without throwing biology completely out the window and embracing the most inanely anti-scientific BS like saying men can get periods and become pregnant and give birth through their manly vaginas. It's utter lunacy, and to their credit, many trans people aren't on board with that shit. It's mainly the activists that claim to speak for the whole group becoming progressively more insane when the stuff they're doing isn't working. But what is trans identity? Is it the mental purgatory between two warring sexes? Is it the perpetual pursuit to live as you identify? And how important is it when weighed against your actual goal? Would you take a cure? If the goal is to live as you identify, a cure would restore the proper biological perspective that you are what you were born as, and that would achieve your goal because you would identify as what you already are and have been your whole life. But if your goal is to exist in this gender purgatory on the fringes of both male and female livelihood, then a cure would certainly rob you of that experience, although I can't fathom why you would prefer it, except to name it as a consequence of your aforementioned crossed brain wires. Or maybe it's just safe to you. Maybe it's all you've known, even though there's nothing safe about being transgender, what with your suicide rate being sky high along with the occasional hate crime, it's still probably somewhat comforting as an identity you can call your own. It's a risk to go try something else on for size, especially when it's permanent. But unfortunately, we still don't know shit about the root of this problem, so there's no real conclusion to draw, other than to try and understand the issue better. They better be working on this shit. And I don't mean letting biological males into girls' locker rooms in high school so they can whip their dick out and give all the girls an anxiety disorder, which one high school just did. I mean medically, we have to figure this out and provide something that focuses on the brain, not the body. Nothing's beyond us if we put our minds to it. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino, and I will see you guys next time.